when I started in public relations, a free newspaper was the sort of newspaper that it wasn't even worth sending a press release to. I think that's changed, but I think it places some context around the changes. But in September of this year, the Manchester Evening News, and I'm from Manchester, the Manchester Evening News editor stepped down, having been in post for about 15 years. And just a few days ago, the same thing happened with the Birmingham Post, two of the biggest regional newspapers in the UK. So what we're starting to see is an acceleration of the decline in print media. And what does that mean for the future of public relations? Well, in the last panel we were asked about crowdsourcing. There's a very, very good tool available to us all for crowdsourcing now called Google Insight, and it allows us to look at what people have been searching for back to the early part of 2004. And I thought, well, we ought to be able to see something about the trend in PR if we look at how many people have searched for PR agency, the term PR agency over that period, because that will give us an idea about the volume of people wanting to work in the industry, potentially clients for agencies, people who are just generally interested. And what we see, and you should be able to see the trend on that chart, is a steady decline. The little dips, extra dips, are actually around Christmas and New Year, so clearly PR agencies go out of people's minds almost completely at that period. But what we've seen is for an index of 100 in the early part of 2004, that's dropped now to just over 50. So half as many people are searching for PR agency as were doing so in the early part of 2004, which is quite a dramatic statistic, really. And I was inclined to do another search that might give me an indication of where, as somebody who worked in the business of public relations for quite a long period of time, where I might focus my energies and the energies of my colleagues. So I thought, well, I'll have a look at social media PR as a term. And what you see is prior to 2006, or in fact prior to the third quarter of 2006, nobody had searched for that term at all. But in fact, the increase in terms of the number is far more significant than the decline in the search for PR agency. And I think that gives us a strong indication as to where we need to be focusing our efforts. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I think social media can do for the industry of public relations and how we can use it. And I think my view is different from some of the people that you'll have seen and will see today, and that I don't think that this is merely an extension of the traditional skills. I think it is that, but I think it's something more as well, and I think it brings considerable dimensions. Out of interest, how many people in the room have used Twitter or used Twitter on a reasonable basis? How many people have never used Twitter? How many people use an application that allows you to kind of group searches like TweetDeck? A reasonable proportion. How many people don't think it's appropriate to put up their hands in events like this? I'm going to tell you a little bit about TweetDeck, and what you'll see is a huge kind of massive information there, too small for any of you to read, even those at the front. But it's a grab that I took yesterday evening from my own TweetDeck, and I use this to search for all sorts of things. So I have a Twitter column set up for clients. I have them set up for kind of general terms that are of interest, like social media. The second column along is TwitScoop, which shows things that are buzzing now. Very interesting, actually. If you look for buzzing on social media, you'll find that certain immediate occurrences occur there before they occur in any other medium. A good example, one that's often quoted, is earthquakes. There's an earthquake in California about 18 months ago that appeared buzzing in applications like TwitScoop 5 seconds after the first tremor, which is extraordinary. The local radio station got to it 5 minutes after, but by that time 15,000 people had tweeted that there was an earthquake in the area. So there are lots of things that you can use this to do, and I promise you that the slide I'm about to show you is not in any way a setup. In fact, it would have been remarkable. So the only very simple point that I wanted to make today is that in keeping with the title of the session, we don't necessarily want to chase our 15 minutes of fame in a world which is so full of noise and so little signal that those 15 minutes are actually worth a great deal less than when Andy Warhol was around.
So, by way of intro, I'm from a company called Headshift. We're a social business design consultancy, but we do also work in externally facing customer engagement and online participation fields. So we touch on PR. Social media is a really dumb term. I mean, essentially most media is or is becoming social. So social media doesn't really have a great deal of meaning. We're much more interested in terms like engagement and conversations and so on. So that's a bit of a caveat, but it's obviously a catchy term. There's this rather unusual quote from someone at Google who said social media is like teen sex. Everybody wants to do it, nobody quite knows how, and afterwards we're not quite sure what happened. And I think that's certainly the case right now, and it reflects the state of the market, which is pretty much dominated by self-declared social media gurus and experts and so on, who believe that just by being on Twitter they're contributing something to your business. However, communication is changing. We've all seen the move from the kind of Leninist broadcast model of traditional PR through to the internet, which enable people to start talking back to the source of messaging. Then, lo and behold, people started talking to each other. And finally, we live in a world with a multiplicity of interconnected networks, where, as Rob was saying, anybody can engage, and an individual can have as many followers as a major news organisation. For me, really, it's always worth going back to the Clue Train manifesto. It's over 10 years old, but I think it still stands as a founding text of the new world of marketing and PR. Among its 95 theses are the basic idea that markets are conversations, and if you want to engage with people, then you need to do so in a human voice and treat them with respect, rather than message them or spin them in a political context, or broadcast to them in a traditional media context. And it's simple stuff, but I think these observations are often missed by many people in this field. Among the developments we're seeing now, real-time social networks are acting as something of an information filter for people. So people on Facebook or Twitter or other social networks tend to report that they receive the best information, the most trusted information from other people in their network, rather than through segmentation and targeting and messaging. And I think that's a big change. But also what we're seeing is that these networks are increasingly operating as influencer networks as well. So we trust.
The case that I'm going to show you right now is an umbrella, Sicuramente Web, is an umbrella initiative that represents Microsoft Italy's commitment to security and internet safety. It builds on Microsoft resources and strategic partnerships with the Italian government, law enforcement agencies, major NGOs such as the UNICEF, Save the Children, and the National Parents Association, as well as industry and media partners, including the Walt Disney Company for the Italian division. Sicuramente Web is a multi-channel CSR campaign strategically devised by Edelman. It leverages all communication channels to reach key target audiences, families, kids, schools and institutions, spans media relations and school programs, includes web campaigns and editorial partnership, blogging and viral activities, public affairs and internal communication, as well as employees' charity. But what is making this case really unique, according to me, is the research and the insight perspective that we put inside the commitment, the goal, the challenge that the client gave us. Sicuramente Web arrived after really many investigations that we did on the Italian market. And let me give you this picture, this overview. In 2006, the National Parents Association interviewed 5,000 parents with children between 11 and 14 years old, 14 years of age, and about 700 secondary school teachers.